So here goes nothing. I'm going to keep the overt spoilers to a minimum and talk about this film pretty generally. If you're worried about me spoiling it, there will be a section near the end where I go fully off. So stick around until then. I'll let you know when it's coming. Ari Aster has made a hell of a name for himself in the last 10 years. Where he was once dubbed the new crown prince of elevated horror, he quickly pivoted to carve out yet another niche as an auteur with a uniquely uncomfortable vision. Every one of his films post Hereditary seems to have divided general audiences, critics, and ride-or-die fans of Aster himself. And Eddington, if my half-assed internet research is to be trusted, seems to be upholding that tradition. And, well, let's talk about it. Ari Aster's fourth feature, Eddington, follows Joe Cross, a sheriff of a modest town in New Mexico with a population of about 2,000 people. It's set in May of 2020, a time of COVID-19 paranoia, mask mandates, lockdowns, social unrest, and a lot of doom scrolling on Facebook. When Joe has a public ideological standoff with Mayor Ted Garcia about the mask mandate, Joe decides to run for mayor to thwart Ted's chances at re-election. This decision spirals the town of Eddington into a frenzy of misinformation, conspiracy, and protest as the citizens and officials of Eddington grapple with the fracturing of American life beyond their borders. When the fissure seeps its way into the fabric of Eddington, everyone's morals and beliefs are put to the test as neighbor is pitted against neighbor. Now, let's get one thing out of the way. This is an incredibly difficult movie to talk about. I felt like I was writing this whole review and I was like, oh yeah, I should probably mention that. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that. So if I didn't mention a specific thing that's on your mind, just know that I'm given a finite amount of time to talk about this movie, and there is a lot to talk about. But first things first, I'm not sure if I could safely file this inside of the movies I enjoy filing cabinet of my memory warehouse for reasons that I'm going to get into in a bit. But I do think it has its own little corner in the movies I admire and respect filing cabinet. There are a couple ways that one can ask the question, what's going on here when watching a movie? Are you saying it with an anticipated grin? Like, what's going on here? Or are you saying it with a cocked eyebrow, a jittery tapping foot, and a wristwatch that beckons to be checked to see how much longer is in the goddamn movie? Unfortunately for me, I felt myself asking what's going on here in the latter way far more than the former. And I think I could boil my frustration down to a few things. Number one, it's bloated. There are too many B, C, and D plots happening around the meat and potatoes of the film, and anytime we cut to one of those side stories, I wanted to say to my neighbor next to me, just wake me up when we get back to the good stuff. This includes anything going on with Emma Stone and Austin Butler, who are obviously great in their roles, but I just think I wish that their roles didn't exist? Is that harsh? Probably. Another storyline I didn't really care for was the teenage love triangle, although that one does have a pretty satisfying conclusion. But a lot of these side stories feel like convenient puzzle pieces connected in just the right way to bring about a conclusion of the film, but in a way that felt a little bit too overtly manufactured, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. This is a scramble of a movie, so my thoughts are a little bit scattered. In addition, the film feels like it's a balloon that's constantly inflating and deflating entirely. And not like in an edging kind of way where the payoff feels extra special because you allowed yourself all of that anticipation. No, it comes across to me more like, and this is also happening. I mean, Austin Butler's religious guru has such a thin ethos, you find yourself getting confused why anyone would get sucked up into his orbit. He talks to Joe and his family about his childhood, and he admits out loud, he says, sounds insane just to hear it coming out of my mouth. And yeah, Ari Aster clearly wants us to feel discombobulated watching this film as we parse through what might be fact and what might be fiction. And this leads back to my next point, which is number two. The movie felt so oddly paced. I didn't check the runtime of Eddington before going in, and I would have sworn, sitting in that theater, that this movie was 3 hours long. If I thought that Beau Was Afraid was inching close to being a little too long, this one felt longer than that. And it's like 30 minutes shorter somehow. I do think this film would have benefited from maybe a few more drafts of the script to whittle it down into that 2 hour mark, hour 40, hour 50 mark. It felt way too long. And number three, I never really bought into Joe's motivations for certain things. Again, I'm going to keep it kind of vague. Granted, it's a movie, it's making a statement, and I can go along for the ride. But when Joe makes the decision that drives the action for the last third of the movie, I found myself once again asking, what's going on here? But hold on, let me just step outside of this negativity hole that I've dug for myself for a minute and talk about the admiration that I was on about earlier. So obviously, this movie will provoke discussion. Maybe it'll piss a lot of people off. And in an interesting twist, it seems geared to piss off the very people that will buy a ticket to it. Typically, with political send ups of this nature, the satirical pistol is aimed at some phantom audience, a core group of, let's just call a spade, far right parties or individuals who don't concern themselves with the media of the woke leftist Hollywood elites. And this is something that's always bothered me about recent political satires. They do tend to pander to an audience that already agrees with them going in. But virtually all ends of the spectrum are on the chopping block here in Eddington. Our protagonist is an anti-mask, common sense conservative who's confused by the present day rift in society he's witnessing and inevitably playing part in, and who doesn't consider the coronavirus or police brutality to be a here problem. Ted Garcia is a smooth-talking politician with a seemingly well-intact moral compass, but he also has his sights on permitting a tech giant named Solid Gold Magikarp, weird name, to build a controversial giant data center just outside of the county, assuring everyone that it won't suck up precious resources and will bring along some precious Silicon Valley jobs or something. He's also depicted in the Vote for Ted Garcia commercials as being a man of the people in those classic, let me help you carry a 2x4, or let me high five as many black people as possible. You want to believe that he's the Ted Garcia we're exposed to publicly, but by virtue of him being a politician, we're already skeptical of his motives. We also have this young white teenager who's lusting after the wokest white woman alive, and so he feels the need to double down with his beliefs with a storyline that probably got the biggest laughs out of any in the theater, especially with how it ends. And then the movie shifts a little bit more when George Floyd is murdered 6 states away, and all these well-meaning teens rush to the streets in protest, and Ari Aster has a lot of fun with this concept. There's even a subtle dig at the posting of black squares on Instagram, and you can't help but hold your head in shame as Sarah, a young white woman bursting with empathy overload, lectures Michael, played by Michael Ward, who is black and a cop and obsessed with Bitcoin, about how he should be responding to the news. These moments of liberal skewering were always played for laughs, and they got them. The kinds of laughs that, to me, read as, haha, at least he's not talking about me, right? Right? I could sense the audience around me squirming, feeling superior to the characters, and perhaps missing the point entirely. And look, I won't pretend that I wasn't also being called out. I like to think I'm self-aware enough, but I also am probably a little bit more politically aligned with Ari Aster than not. Beyond all that, there's also a great deal of sight gags in this film, mostly in the form of viral headlines on a phone or a computer screen, all competing for attention. There's even one that reminded me of the murder hornets. You guys remember that? It's all kind of funny until you're forced to sit with the feeling that all of this gives you, a feeling that, to be honest, persists to this day, is influencers and phonies and even real journalists are incentivized to collect enough eyeballs and tell those eyeballs that are hopefully connected to susceptible brains what they should think and how they should feel and how outraged they should be about X, Y, or Z. The subtle horror of this film is really another aspect of it that deserves props. And let's be real here, COVID really was a paradigm shift, and it's only natural that a film like this was going to be made. And to that end, I have to say it's a very solid attempt that mostly works to put this technologically induced polarization of our country into sharp focus. I mean, every time that Joe opens up Facebook on his phone, I winced a little bit and died inside. This element and this hyper specificity that brings us all back to that time, which is a weird thing to say about something that was only 5 years ago, is what makes this film worth admiring and respecting, in my opinion. When the film is tackling the absurdity of white kids protesting in the middle of the street, the grassroots effort to ignore the mask mandate, the neighbor versus neighbor aspect of this film, which is the film we were pitched through the marketing, that's when it's at its strongest, in my opinion. And this is a very talky movie, and that's perfect because you have the opportunity for small gestures to speak volumes, for blips of miscommunication to incite riots, and for poor phrasing to snowball into an Antifa massacre. Antifa in quotes there. I think from here on out, I'm going to drop a few major spoilers So if you have not seen Eddington and don't want to know about any specifics of the third act, I suggest that you stop here. I would even like to commend the final act of this film when it feels like it transitions into something akin to a high-octane Taylor Sheridan thriller. Think Wind River or Hell or High Water, or the work of Jeremy Saulnier. I was detecting notes of Green Room or Rebel Ridge all over this, a film that I might find superior to this one. Talk about the first modern Western. I don't know why people are calling Eddington the first modern American Western. I felt like Rebel Ridge was pretty Western influenced. The climactic sequence is bold, bloody, unpredictable, and undeniably tense. But that being said, when that sequence is happening, I yet again feel like the film lost a bit of the plot. And thinking back on it, I saw this last night, it is kind of cool that we get a weird clashing of conservative battling Antifa with a Rambo gun as some kind of power play fantasy, and then we're served a side dish of a Kyle Rittenhouse send-up where the white kid goes so far left that he ends up as a far-right grifter taking selfies with Marjorie Taylor Greene and starting a podcast. His speech at the candlelight vigil where he says, "My job is to sit down and listen as soon as I've finished my speech," which I have no right to make, and lest we forget I'm making the speech on stolen land, was some of the funniest shit in this movie. And then to see him radicalized, to pivot so hard in the other direction, was not only believable, but kind of terrifying. And even with that whole paragraph I said there, I feel myself waffling between admiring this film and not fully vibing with this film. But let's move on. All of this being said, it's so easy to play the "this isn't the film that I wanted" card, and that's why it's always a cheap shot. But that being said, I'll throw mine in the mix. I think the film that I wanted was a reverse 12 Angry Men, a town full of people getting split apart due to one man's persistent persuasion. A Gangs of New York style battle of the political ideologies sparked by a government-instituted mask mandate in the first few months of a global pandemic, mixed with the murder of George Floyd. A film that depicted the rapid radicalization in either direction due to social instability, personal identity crisis, and the influence of social media. To a degree, we get aspects of all of this, but it really feels muddied and overcrowded, which could very well be the intention. It could be a representation of what it feels like to doom scroll on a Facebook feed for an entire afternoon, a total inundation of information overload. But just because something is intentional doesn't mean it totally works. In this case, I kept waving my arms like one of those aircraft marshals saying, no, go back to the good stuff, far too often for me to say that this was a home run for me. But I guess I'll wrap this whole thing up by saying Ari Aster is for sure, without a doubt, a fascinating and competent director. More than competent, I would say. The visual style, the sense of a clear vision, the humor, which I really should have touched on more, the sound design, the costume design, the production design, it's all exceptionally realized. The cinematography is also great here. Darius Kanji has had such an odd career. He was the DP for Seven, The Beach, Midnight in Paris, Uncut Gems, and he's been on an incredible hot streak in recent years. And to put a little bow on this whole vomit draft of a movie review, I'm always going to be seated for an Ari Aster project, or any project that dares to be bold and provocative, especially in our current political climate where censorship seems to be at an all-time high. Rest in peace, NPR and PBS. It's such a cliche, but there is legitimate value in holding a mirror up to society. And I think that this centrist, maybe, vision that Ari Aster has crafted here is a mirror that more than just one side needs to see. There's a real tragedy at the end, too, of there really being a whole land of victims in all of this, pointing fingers in the wrong direction and coming away with further identity loss. It's easy to blame technology and social media. It may be even correct, but much like guns, these things are tools in the hands of people. I know that's a loaded way to end this review, pun intended, and the metaphor isn't a perfect one-to-one, but the sentiment is generally the same. We have it in our hearts to bridge the divide between all of us. I think that Ari Aster might agree with that. But then again, I don't know, because this film does seem to end on the cynical note of, you made your bed, now go lie in it forever. Literally. But what did you guys think of Eddington? I know this is going to be a polarizing film. If the reviews I'm seeing already are any indication, it already is a polarizing film. So let me know down in the comments if you think that I got it right. If you made it this far into the review, you could probably tell I'm a little bit both sidesing this movie. I think that I have great respect and admiration for it, but I do think it's about 30 minutes too long, and there are a few too many things that get in the way of what the movie is really trying to say. But I do think when the movie is focused on what it's trying to say, and when it's really trying to talk about this radical divide between all of us at the hands of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, I think that that's when the movie is at its strongest. I also didn't really touch on the idea that this sort of group of Antifa militia that come after Joe at the end of the film are actually funded by the corporation that is making the data mining center in town, which I guess is just a commentary that all of the strings are being pulled by forces outside of our own control. And there's a lot to talk about with this movie. So to reiterate what I said at the beginning, if I didn't mention a specific aspect of the film that stood out to you, I apologize. I only have so much time to talk about these things. And yeah, this is a tough film to talk about in its totality. And I do think I want to see it again to pick up on some of those other smaller nuances that I maybe missed the first time. But hey, maybe that's actually a stronger endorsement of the film than it is a rejection of it. But yeah, let me know what you thought of Eddington down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel. Go follow me on Letterboxd, and I'll see you all next time.